What's up, guys? My name is Andy, and I wrote a book. It's called Gentlemen, This is the Gospel. What you are about to listen to is the introduction to that book. If you like what you hear, we ask that you consider grabbing a copy on Amazon and sharing this on social media. You're welcome. Introduction. Gentlemen, this is a football. Get the fundamentals down, and the level of everything you do will rise. Michael Jordan. We win our games in practice. We learn and follow the fundamentals of our game better than anyone in the league. All our games are won in practice. Vince Lombardi. Fundamentals are everything. Fundamentals are everything. Fundamentals are everything in sports, in business, and in life. In every discipline imaginable, fundamentals are everything. They are the solid, concrete foundation upon which everything that you want to build and accomplish is built upon. The more intuitive and innate the fundamentals are, the more incarnational they become, and the wider and deeper that foundation is, which allows you to build even higher and even wider. Just thinking in terms of sports, those who are considered the GOAT, greatest of all time, men like Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Tiger Woods, Muhammad Ali, and so on, all seem to be naturally gifted. Like Michael Jordan just picked up a basketball one day and was just better than everybody. We think these men were just born with an insane amount of talent, and that must be what set them apart. No doubt these men were gifted. However, the one thing that they all had in common was that they were all insanely disciplined and focused and had mastery of the fundamentals of their game, so much so that whenever they played, it almost seemed magical. This leads many to conclude that these guys were just born different. However, what we see of them in the arena is simply a brief moment in time and is the result of hours, days, months, years, and decades of the grind, mastering the basics and fundamentals of their game to the point to where it was just part of their person. Fundamentals became instinctual. This isn't just true of these men or the respective sports they represent. It's true across the board in every discipline. Without a mastery of the fundamentals, the details become useless and the results become short-lived. This doesn't mean that you won't have success along the way. What this does mean is that those successes will likely be short-lived and will not stand the trials of life, which are sure to come. Lombardi. When speaking about the importance of fundamentals, one man stands out above the rest because his name is synonymous with mastering the fundamentals. That man is Vince Lombardi. This guy is stuff of legend and lore and was a total badass at a time when men were just built different. These athletes were not concocted in a lab somewhere. These were not guys that lived in the weight room, nor would they ever post a picture of themselves on Instagram, nor share their personal best or weight loss journey on social media. Yet hitting them was like hitting a cold, hard piece of steel. Lombardi is arguably the greatest football coach ever. He won 5 NFL championships within 7 years and never coached a team with a losing record. His name is even synonymous with the Super Bowl trophy. It's kind of hard to compete with that. That is, when the very sign and symbol of victory and success, the Super Bowl trophy, which is won by the best team in the league any given year, dons your name, you've pretty much arrived. It was almost as if Vince was destined for a life of badassery. His father, Enrico Harry Lombardi, was the son of Italian immigrants. His nickname when he was young was Moon, because his head was shaped like a moon. However, when he was older, everyone just called him Old 5x5, although no one called him this while he was around. This was because he was built like a square. Apparently, the guy was thick as a brick and was like a walking tree trunk. He was also one of those old school guys that just had natural strength, being able to pick up a coal shovel with one hand while 2 children sat on the end of it. In short, the guy was a total OG. Even better still, he owned his own butcher shop with his brother and was covered in tattoos, the best of which were on his hands. He had the letters of work tattooed on each finger of his left hand and the letters of play tattooed on the fingers of his right hand. Vince grew up under his tutelage in southeast Brooklyn. Like I said, Vince was almost destined for a life of badassery. He had a way of motivating men and bringing the best out of them. Whether or not they always appreciated this is a different matter entirely. However, he expected the best from himself, just as he did from others. There was absolutely no place for whining, entitlement, laziness, or half-assery. These were not only cardinal sins in Vince's book, they also put your own health at risk. And in a violent game, they put all of your teammates' health at risk as well. He truly believed that there's only one way to succeed in anything, and that is to give it everything. Lombardi once said, "Football is a great deal like life in that it teaches that work, sacrifice, perseverance, competitive drive, selflessness, and respect for authority are the price that each and every one of us must pay to achieve any goal that is worthwhile." The thing that is so amazing about Lombardi isn't the level of success that he achieved consistently, but that when he achieved it, he never forgot why he achieved it. What is all too common in football and in life is not necessarily forgetting the fundamentals, but rather assuming them. Everyone understands that if muscles aren't used, they atrophy. This is true of skills as well. If you are a man of a certain age and have tried something that you haven't done for some time, but were great at it in your 20s, you soon come to find out that your 20s, or 30s for that matter, are long gone. And with that era, so too are your skills. A piece of humble pie isn't bad on occasion. However, it always seems to taste better when other people are eating it. Life is a grind, and we can't coast through it or live off past successes for long without consequences. Self-sacrifice, prayer, love, and communication are the concrete that you build on for a happy and thriving marriage. However, if you have a happy and thriving marriage, it is not as though you get to the point where all of those things are no longer necessary. Just the opposite is true. Heavy compound pressing exercises can make you strong, but when said strength is achieved, it is not as though you move on to other exercises as if those are no longer required. Again, just the opposite is true. In fact, those exercises are all the more necessary now to continue to increase your strength and to maintain the strength you've already built. There was a book my wife and I used to read to our children when they were little. It's called We're Going on a Bear Hunt by Helen Oxenberry and Michael Rosen. It's about a family that's going on, well, a bear hunt, apparently unarmed for reasons unknown. As they search for a bear, they have to overcome much treacherous terrain. They cannot go over it. They cannot go under it. They cannot go around it. They are just going to have to go through it. Fundamentals are kind of like that, in that you never get around them, never get above them, and never get beyond them. You have to hold on to them and go through them again and again and again, and then some more. Perhaps nothing marked Lombardi out more as a coach than his obsession with fundamentals. He once said, "Some people try to find things in this game that don't exist, but football is only two things: blocking and tackling." Pretty basic stuff, right? No need to reinvent the wheel. Of course, Lombardi knew that there was more involved in football than that. However, this does emphasize a very important point. That is, not just to keep the main thing, always the main thing, but also to be very good at the main thing. At the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what you can execute. You can have all the fancy plays in the world, but if you can't execute them, it doesn't matter at all. If you play a team that is better at blocking and tackling, better at the fundamentals, they are going to win every time. One such story that stresses this, perhaps in the most exquisite and hyperbolic of ways, comes from the beginning of the Packers training camp in July of 1961. The previous season, the Green Bay Packers had made it to the championship game, which was a monumental feat. Lombardi had brought his team from the worst in the league to one of the best in a very short amount of time. However, they had squandered their lead in the fourth quarter and lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. Granted, they still lost, but what an accomplishment. How did Lombardi address his team in the locker room after the game? He said, "Gentlemen, we got beat today, but I can tell you right now, we will never lose a championship game again." The amazing thing is, they never did. So all of this is in the background coming into training camp for the 1961 season. Instead of resting on their laurels and celebrating their victories, they had been stewing over the loss the entire offseason. Also, keep in mind that these are some of the best players in the NFL. Many of them had been playing football their entire lives and had reached the top of the game and were eager to hit the next level and win the championship. By all accounts, these men had made it, and perhaps Macho Man Randy Savage would call them the cream. How did Lombardi address his men as they walked into training camp? He took nothing for granted, and the only assumption he made was that his players were a blank slate. He didn't presuppose all the knowledge from the previous year poured over into this one. As he looked at his team through his thick black-rimmed glasses, 38 men stared back at him. He held up a football with his gnarled, calloused right hand and said with a deep, gravelly voice, one that can only be obtained through a great multitude of cigarettes, "Gentlemen, this is a football." This was a total OG move and would set the tone for the rest of training camp. It didn't matter how successful these men had been in the past. It didn't matter how much they got paid or how many fans they had. Football is all about the football. If you control it, you control the game, and you win. You never get above it, beyond it, or around it. He then went on to go over the basics, how to block and how to tackle with each player, over and over again. He was obsessed and determined to make sure that his team was the absolute best at everything everybody else had taken for granted. He knew that if he mastered that, they would win. But if they forgot that, he and his men would eventually be on the receiving end of a good old-fashioned ass-whooping. That was inconceivable for Lombardi's mind to handle. So he drilled them and drilled them some more. And then after passing out or puking, they were drilled again, and then some more after that. Was it all overkill? 6 months later, the Packers would go on to beat the Giants 37-0 and win the NFL championship. Our country is a hot mess. Our country is a hot mess. We are all like a bunch of children running around in one great big wide open minefield. We lost any anchoring to sanity a long time ago, but in the last few years the Overton window has shifted so much that it is not only our country that is completely unrecognizable, it's humanity. When you abandon the Word of God and His law, you don't get freedom, you get slavery. You don't get order, you get chaos. You don't get light, you get darkness. This is the irrationalism of rationalism. It's not rational. Nothing makes sense, and apart from God, we just keep trying to dig ourselves out of the ditch we put ourselves in. Just think about how damnably stupid we've become as a nation. All the COVID crazy was a grand exercise in retardery. We were so concerned about our health, while at the same time being skeptical of all authority. So what did we do? We allowed the government, in conjunction with the pharmaceutical companies, to pump the populace full of an experimental drug. We were so concerned about the economy we ruined that we did the most logical thing we could do. We spent trillions of dollars attacking the greatest existential threat the world has ever known, climate change, and also whiteness. How is that going for us? It is hard to tell. We've been too busy spending our way out of inflation to help fix the economy. Remember the summer of love, when everyone fought against systemic racism by allowing a bunch of middle-class white kids to burn down minority cities? Take that, racism. What about the children? It's true, times have been tough and crazy, but we've really made sure to protect the kids in all of this madness. They are the future, after all. Because we love children so much, we've done everything in our power to ensure their access to legitimate medical procedures, like cutting off their genitals, while also ensuring they have access to the medicine they need, like sterilization drugs. But above and beyond that, because we also love women and families so much, states have taken it upon themselves to do what the federal government couldn't. That is, codify into their state constitutions the right of women to be able to kill their babies up into the time of birth. Men contribute nothing to pregnancy, so it is finally nice to see them protecting women. While we're on the topic of abortion, it would be a crime not to say something about Roe. As Roe was overturned, the conservatives were handed the greatest victory they have ever received through the courts. After fighting for over a half century to overturn the horrors of Roe, What did they do? They did the most obvious thing one would do under said circumstances. They apologized for it while the most devastating and disgusting pro-baby murder laws were being passed in the states. What else would you expect from the party of family values? The conservatives are so conservative that they have managed to conserve nothing over the years. However, they are still very much for families. However, at the same time, they want to let you know that the new Republican Party is definitely not like your grandfather's Republican Party. Again, while still conserving family values, like abortion on demand as long as the baby isn't too big, or trans rights as long as you get your genitals cut off after the age of 18. You know you're in big trouble when the Conservative Party's platform is, "We're not as nuts as they are." But if we give it a few years, perhaps mermaids and minotaurs will have a voice among conservatives as well. What about the church? Surely the pillar and buttress of truth was a shining beacon of light in such dark times. Surely the Church of Jesus Christ provided wisdom and clarity amidst such confusion and insanity. Because we believe in the separation of church and state so much, they were able to provide an independent voice to their people after the government told them what to do. This was very important because you still had some within the church that thought we should try to step back from the madness and search the scriptures for wisdom. Come to find out, those people were only trying to cause division by being unloving. However, you can always count on evangelicals to do the right thing after the fact when it costs them nothing. After the government check stopped and they hemorrhaged out enough people and lost all of their dwindling credibility they still had, they decided it was time to let everyone know how important it was to begin meeting again. Surely there must have been some men that called a spade during all of this madness. Yes and amen. There were some voices of reason in all of this. What are these valiant defenders of orthodoxy doing after being proven right on so many issues? Well, attacking each other on social media, because nothing says advancing the cause of Christ in the world like cannibalism. The Jews must be to blame for that, too. Some would say yes, but young men are being red-pilled at record numbers. Surely that is encouraging. Yes, as far as it goes. However, that is not happening as a result of the church, but rather because the wheels are falling off the clown car rolling down the street. All of this while there are record numbers of young women being blue-pilled, which I'm sure will end well. Some may argue that it certainly seems like some pockets of the church are growing. This may be the case, but this seems to be more of a result of migration than anything else. But if strong churches are getting stronger as a result of that, isn't that a good thing? Sure, and when this is the case, we should thank God for His grace. However, this would just prove my point that this is not happening across the board. Furthermore, one could argue that this is the result of God shaking things up to strengthen what remains. There is certainly a shaking going on, and that shaking includes turning us over to our own devices. But even outside of the obvious, like said shaking, when things are shaken, things fall off, and things are removed. When a tree is pruned, it is much healthier, but it would be dumb to lie to ourselves and say, "Look at all the pretty new branches." If a multitude of branches are removed, what remains can seem to have grown, but it's only grown in proportion to the mass of the whole tree, which just shrunk. My point being that redistribution doesn't count as growth. However, as a general principle, we should all concede that the reallocation of resources to those who are actually doing their job is a good thing. What the church needs. All of this brings me back to my original assertion that everything is a hot mess and that we are living through crazy times, which is me exercising a great degree of Christian charity. Either way, we should all be able to conclude with that great theologian Bob Dylan that the times they are a-changin'. What does all of this mean for the people of God? Where do we go from here? It seems as though there are battles to be fought on every front, and every single last one of them seems big and important. What do you do when it seems like the enemy is constantly ahead of the game, and you are only, always, and in every way playing defense? You want to be in the game, but you feel like you're the only one getting played. When Vince Lombardi took over as head coach and general manager in 1959, They had the worst record in Packers history, with a record of 1-10-1, even though they had 6 Hall of Famers on the roster. The Green Bay community was deflated. The players were demoralized, and the shareholders were overwhelmed and discouraged, questioning whether or not the team could stay in existence. Where others saw a train wreck waiting to happen, Lombardi saw great opportunity. He came into this situation with a steely resolve to win, and with great confidence that he would. How would he do this? Discipline and focus. He did this by being humble, being hungry, and being the hardest worker in the room. He did this by mastering things that others assumed and took for granted. He did this through an obsession with fundamentals. Gentlemen, this is a football. This is what the church needs today. It needs men of steely resolve, unshakable discipline, and unbridled optimism. We need men with an absolute obsession with the fundamentals. This will not cap our growth or limit our ability to speak into everything. Rather, quite the opposite. This will remove all caps on our growth and will allow the gospel to permeate every area of our lives. What we need is grizzled and gruff men of lore to come before us and hold up an old, well-worn leather Bible in their right hand and say, "Gentlemen, this is the gospel."